So it's now really my pleasure to introduce Dr. Brian Hodges, who's a professor in the Faculty of Medicine and the Faculty of Education at the University of Toronto. He holds the Currie Chair in Health Professions Education Research at the Wilson Centre, and he's the Executive Vice President of Education here at the University Health Network. And for those I think most people are aware, but this now includes the Toronto General, Toronto Western, Princess Margaret, the Toronto Rehab Hospitals, and the Michener Institute. He's a practicing psychiatrist and teacher, and his research is really focused on assessment, competence, compassion, and the future of health professions. He's also the project lead for the AMS Phoenix Project, A Call to Caring, which is actually where I've actually had the pleasure to get to know him a little bit. And it really is a project that is designed to rebalance the technical and compassionate dimensions of healthcare. So we're really, really pleased to have you here, and please give a warm welcome to Brian.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you just turn the feedback off, no? Thank you. So, you know, the heartbeat and the typing and everything is probably a perfect illustration of how technology can certainly add and facilitate, but also complicate our lives somewhat. And so I'm very pleased to talk to you today. I want to thank Emily and Lee for the introductions. I want to recognize Josh, where's Josh Tepper, CEO of Health Quality Ontario, for coming in for this partnership with UHN. A third partner in this is also the Michener Institute, and this is one of our Big Ideas series. We had one on simulation, another one coming by Peter Pisters, our current CEO, on blockchain technology. So the merger of HQO and the Michener Institute, the UHN, and of course the AMS is really a pleasure. So I want to talk to you a bit about something that's very near and dear to my heart in many ways, and probably most as a practicing clinician. I am also in the technical age, and so I'm happy to connect with you, of course, via Quorum and the HQO systems, but if you'd like to exchange via Twitter, this is an easy way to get in contact with me. So here's the framework, and I enjoyed reading it. I knew about it. It's important. It's spreading across Ontario and the world. I see it cited often. But I think an interesting question to ask when you look at this framework is, to what degree is compassionate care linked to the idea of quality? And I want to look at that, of course, through the lens of technology. I also want to introduce to you two books that you might be interested. The first really should be read by every health professional today, On the Future of the Professions, by Susskind and Susskind, father and son in Oxford University, have some very challenging things to say about the future of health professions, which I think are important to understand. I'll touch on some of that. And a book that I had a pleasure to do a small role in editing, essays on the question of competence, what competence really is in the health professions, and how that's changing, and how it's very much challenged by the environment we're in. And I'll be drawing on those two books today. So to really get into this, I think we have to think a little bit about what health professionals will be in the 21st century. And I'm not sure there's a period of time in my life, and certainly much before that, where we actually asked a fundamental existential question: what are health professionals? And even, dare I say, are we always necessary? Will we be replaced? These are urgent, compelling things. Susskind and Susskind asked us, when we think about the future of professional education, to start by asking what capabilities will be needed most that human professionals can bring. Nowhere in my education was I ever challenged to think of any other kind of service provider other than a human. But today, that's a serious issue. All professions have competence frameworks, and they're all a little bit different, but if you boil them down, you can come down to basically Aristotle's conception from 2,000 years ago, that we all have a specialized area of knowledge, we all have an area of technical skills, and we all have an area that he called phronesis, which is the practical wisdom that knits it together to allow us to do our work. And without these three spheres, we're not professionals. And no matter what your job is, I think you can see somehow how this is important. And I'm going to argue that all three of these are under some challenge or even threat. The top two are going to be drastically transformed by technology. They're already being drastically transformed. And I'll come back at the end to argue that if we don't pay attention to the third, to caring and compassion, there will be no need for us as health professionals. So let's look at knowledge and cognition first. Some very important transformations underway. Knowledge is now in the cloud. When I went to school, it was in textbooks, and sometimes in my head if I stayed up late memorizing. The digitization of human capacity has changed the way we understand who we are and how we work with each other. And of course, the most recent arrival of deep learning, artificial intelligence. Over next door at Princess Margaret Hospital, we've installed the first artificial intelligence planning program for radiation therapy. What took 4 hours per patient now takes 4 minutes. 165 people are employed to do that. It's important that we understand how that's transforming their work. The digitization of human beings changes what it means to be a human being. How many of you have a Fitbit or another device on your arm? So you've chosen to sell your digital fingerprint to a corporation. And there's some very good things about that. That corporation might be UHN. It might be HQO. It might be the government of Ontario. It might be Google or Apple. But you've digitized yourself. We're all becoming more and more digital, and this is affecting the way we relate to each other. On a very positive side, in terms of increasing quality of care, the omnipresence of data will allow us to care for people in a way that doesn't always require physical presence. This is the contact lens that can detect blood sugar. People we can realize, I think, the vision of care in the home, in the community, because we'll have sources of information about people that don't need to travel. The idea of going to a hospital for care is actually a very recent invention and not a particularly effective one. The arrival of robotics and artificial intelligence, this is the cover of U of T's Medical News last year, is also going to transform things. Here in Toronto Rehab Hospital upstairs in physiotherapy, we have robotic positioning now. So people in their physiotherapy will interact with a robot as part of their... what does that do? How does that work? How is that received and experienced? The studies are coming so fast I can hardly keep up with them. Here's two from recent data. On the left is dermatology. This article in Nature, a deep learning artificial intelligence system was trained with 150,000 images to recognize skin lesions. If you're like me, I'm very pigmentally challenged. Every time something shows up on my skin, I worry about it. You know, I have friends that have had various forms of serious problems. And I worry, and when I first see it, I think, oh, I'll ignore it, but it weighs on my mind. Then I get out the hydrocortisone cream from, you know, Derm when I was a resident in 1988. Probably, literally. Then I start going, well, should I call my family doctor? Oh, I don't know, it'll probably be gone. And if it's really staying, I'm thinking maybe the dermatologist. But we know what that's like to get to the dermatologist. So already now available is you can take a picture with your smartphone and feed it into the system, and it'll have a greater than dermatologist accuracy in terms of its ability to tell you the risk of that lesion. Why would patients not want that? Why would accessibility, efficiency, quality, and by the way, not worrying, not drive us toward a system where we disrupt the whole referral system for dermatology? On the right is a retinal image. Retinal imaging, Emily mentioned our history with invention and discovery of insulin. Of course, in diabetes, the staging and management is still very, very important. And this is a study where AI, artificial intelligence, was used to stage compared to experts in retinopathy. And the AI system was equally efficient, equally accurate. This is a very big disruption in the knowledge area of our professions. Whoops, that's the wrong way. But more than that, it's also integrative. Some people say, oh yeah, but this is just superficial. This is images, photos. Yes, people will love that, but the thinking, what health professionals do is integrate complex information. Well, this is a study from the journal Radiology about predicting clinical outcomes. A deep learning system was given scans, MRIs, cardiac cath, stress tests, blood results, etc., and 8 years of patient chart data. When you go to do a consult, do you sit down and thoroughly read 8 years of chart data? I don't. I can't. My human brain is not able to process that much information. So I look at the last discharge summary. And we know from that kind of research, how many medical errors are in the last discharge? 50%? Yeah. Therefore, it's a bit of an unfair comparison, but perhaps not surprising to you that the experienced doctors, cardiologists, were able to predict 1-year survival with about a 60% accuracy rate, whereas the deep learning system was over 80%. I'm guessing patients would like to have a fairly accurate prediction of their life expectancy, whether it's congestive heart failure or a malignant cancer or a rare condition. So that's what technology is going to do. But you didn't come here to hear what technology is going to do. What I want to raise, and I don't know, I think I may be among the first few people raising this question, but what are humans going to do? What's the human part? And maybe we need to identify the part that humans can do that machines can't do, at least for now. So what is it? And I've given some thought to this. I think it's one very simple thing. I think it's something called metacognition. So health sciences schools were all about cramming vast amounts of information into your brain for a long time. That's oversimplifying it. And of course, we've discovered things like problem-based learning. But the reality is, I think, that all the knowledge is held and will increasingly be analyzed in computer-based systems. So what do we need to do? Metacognition is an awareness of our own learning and our own thinking processes. And I believe that as we go into an environment with a lot of automated systems, the most important thing we can do is think about thinking. Observe our own mind and how it's working. Observe the artificial minds and how they're working, and how our colleagues and ourselves are interacting. This is extremely important for safety. We'll come later to situational awareness. But it's not okay anymore for the solo practitioner to just put their head down, solve problems, and work. You have to be aware of the whole system. In the United States, I was in Vanderbilt University, very progressive, and they've based their whole medical school now on a concept of metacognition. They say the point of medical school is to serve as a foundation for professionalism and empathy, to gain an understanding of one's habits and patterns of thinking and emotion, a humbling appreciation for the fallibility of the human mind and cognition, and understand the interplay of cognition and emotion. The foundation of education. That's a radical shift and a very interesting one, which I think is actually exciting because it focuses on amazing human qualities that we need to, rather than memorizing, cramming facts for a final test. So I think a cognitive competence for the future that links what we do as professionals, that ties to our ability to provide quality care and embraces our humanness, will be recognizing that most of the knowledge we need will be held externally, not in here. They will have to invest in understanding our own strengths and our own blind spots in the way we think and work. And ideas like metacognition, but also mindfulness and situational awareness are increasingly being linked to safety and quality. Here's our safety team here. They're attempting to teach 20,000 people at UHN about situational awareness, about how to be vigilant, about how to ask questions, about how to speak up. These are the linkers between our human capacity, safety, and quality. Let's go to technical skill now. This is my understanding of the health professions. This is really why I went into it. When I was 16 and I became an orderly and I cared for dying patients and looked after elderly people, it was this that was the essence of why I went into being a health professional. But the transformation of our environments means that this doesn't happen so much. Many things are happening in the areas of skills which are going to substantially improve the quality of care and the kinds of things we can do. They will include human augmentation, robotics, and automation, but they're going to fundamentally change this. This is the 200th anniversary of the invention of the stethoscope. So when Laennec in France apparently rolled up a paper and realized that he could hear, I think, bowel sounds, I'm not sure what he was originally listening to, but this was a big jump forward, and the stethoscope has been a huge advance for all of us. But look at this diagram another way. It opened a tiny little space between this clinician and this patient. And that space has been getting wider and wider. And if we can no longer bridge the space by touch, we have to bridge it with an interpersonal relationship. And if we decentralize ourselves, and this Rounds is a good example, but if we move the radiology department down the hall, or we have the digital interpretation center disconnected except by your cell phone, we also then put another barrier between us and our interpersonal communications. Whoops. So, making this even more imperative, I think, is that even the stethoscope itself is now becoming an outdated technology. The New York Times wrote an article about how it's now a sign of status, but not a tool that anyone really uses. So as our older technologies go in the museum showcase, they get replaced with very, very interesting ones. This is a real question. Have you actually met a robotic phlebotomist? They exist, and I've seen them, and they're apparently highly accurate. And at first it looks like a Singer sewing machine that my mom had in the basement. They look kind of scary. And at first I thought this was horrible until I was in Sweden recently talking with a newspaper reporter, and she said to me, oh yeah, I had my blood taken by one of those, and it was amazing. It actually looked in my eyes and made me feel quite comfortable. It had a pepper robot attached to it. So yeah. And having been poked and prodded by students to try to find a vein 100 times, I can imagine that something with a high accuracy might be welcomed by people. But welcomed by people, but everything becomes obsolete, and we have watched technology evolve in areas around us. On the right is the pharmacy kiosk. We're going to get those, aren't we, Emily? So for the pharmacy profession and technology would be transformed by this, like the bank machine or the airport. But what's even more interesting is to watch the tumultuous story of Uber. This is an article in the National Post last year called "The Robots That Ate Pittsburgh," and this was because Uber had announced a partnership with the city of Pittsburgh to be the first city in which all the taxis would be without drivers. And so the writer of this post wrote a really interesting thing, and he said the CEO, and we all know about the CEO of Uber and the significant problems, but never mind. He said, even if you listen to him and what he's proposing sounds like cold-blooded capitalism, that is true, assuming you have no problem with the fact that 32,000 deaths are caused every year by motor vehicle accidents. And so he asks the question, when will we revoke humanity's driver's license? Should human beings be allowed to drive? But I'm asking, when will we revoke humanity's license to operate, to do lumbar punctures, draw blood, insert central lines, or read x-rays? If the same calculation can be shown about a greater safety increment of humans, of automated systems versus machines, how many medication errors did we make in the last 46 fatal or serious medication errors at UHN in the last 5 years? Operating on the wrong side of the body, wrong x-rays. These are safety and quality issues. This is stereotactic neurosurgery. I think if I was having my brain operated on today, I would want something more or less like the system that helps me back up my car and not crash into things. And what the neurosurgeons tell me is that automated guidance systems are being built into the operating room so that it will help you. It'll say, that structure in front of you, don't cut that. Or in 25% of the population, that vessel serves the occipital lobe, or this kind of things. And so this will increasingly be built in. I don't think we're going to have a robot operating. But to what degree is this a human operating with a robotic help? So in this area, again, the question that I'm really very excited and interested about, and by the way, I think all of the institutions I've mentioned that coming together today can play a leading role in the world asking this question. What role should humans play in quality care in the area of skills? So some glimpses. This is the Da Vinci robot. We have this operating at Toronto General Hospital. They're now spreading across the province. Robotic surgery is very, very interesting. But I feel having gone to see it, it was quite a thing. I'm a psychiatrist, so I hadn't been in the operating room for probably 30 years. When Gillian Gravely, the head of the OR, took me around, it was breathtaking. There was Joan Murphy sitting, operating. Operating meant she was facing the wall with a console that looked like the Phantom of the Opera, while in the middle of the room, a woman was suspended from the ceiling by straps, while the Da Vinci robot, metal rods went in and out of her, removing her uterus. This is a transformation of the space of the operating room and the concept of skills beyond anything I could have imagined. And that's happening now. That's not a futuristic thing. So we're going to be collaborating with machines. We're going to be working together with robots. They won't always look like Pepper with the eyes and looking in a robot is a system, but it's going to be very, very important. And those robotic systems will undoubtedly improve and affect quality and safety. I'm sure they will. But the degree to which we can work effectively with them will have something to do with that. So the human-machine interface that melds human psychomotor skills with machine guidance. Just think of your car. I don't actually think we're going to have entirely self-driving vehicles and no humans. I think probably what will win will be guidance systems, which increase safety. I probably won't be allowed to tailgate. I just drove down from my cottage on the weekend. What is it with people, right? I probably will have guidance on my speeds. I probably will not be able to do certain dangerous things. I'm guessing this is also going to be what comes into our technological environment, at least at first. But we know something else is present. Who has a GPS in the room? Okay. So when I come down from my cottage, it's a long drive, I don't need the GPS. But when I go somewhere else, I do. And for a while, I had that British woman voice. And every time she said to me, oh, recalculating, my brain, what I heard was, oh, you stupid idiot, you don't know how to drive your car. Go back and get it. And so I changed the voice. And then there were only a couple options. So I went to the guy, the male American, but unfortunately had a voice that sounded like the Deep South and Hurricane Harvey and all that. And I don't know, I had a reaction to the voice. And so I changed. I've got the Australian guy right now. I mean, entertains me. Imagine all kinds of things. But it's, you know, but what does that mean? It means I'm having a relationship with my GPS. And so the movie Her is not so weird. It's not so far off. You know, they've started to talk about a problem with children now. It's back to school, right? Kids 4, 5, and 6 are showing up and yelling at their kindergarten teacher like the way they talk to their computer-assisted toys. Turn on Google. Should a 5-year-old be told to say that? There's a big debate right now about whether we should insist on etiquette with machines. So when the next time you're talking to the ECG machine, I want you to think about what relationship you have with it. Not because it's a sentient being or has feelings, but because of what it's doing to the way you're going to communicate when you walk down the hall and talk to your colleagues. So I perhaps have tried to convince you that the first two domains are going to change very radically. So let's go to the one where we are comfortable that this is why we're here. Health professions are here for caring, compassion, and presumably we need to hang on to that. Siri is not very good yet as a health professional, although she's getting better. And all of these systems will enable more and more good things because we'll be able to access them for important help at the bedside. You'll be able to use your handheld to access all kinds of information. We'll be able to work with patients directly and families, and they'll be able to work with these systems. But the role that these systems will play are really interesting and important to understand. This is from the New York Times, and this is a picture of an actual android now working in a shopping center in Tokyo. And apparently she's fully functional and at least as effective as the person who used to sit there and giving information about how to find things in the store. So I remember saying to Bob Bell one time when he was my boss, I guess he's still all of our boss, isn't he? I said, Bob, who do you think the most important person in UHN is? And he said, I'm guessing from the way you're asking this, you don't think it's me. Sounds like Bob. And I said, maybe it's you, but number 2 would be the person at the reception of the emergency department, because that sets the tone for the entire encounter. But that's one of those jobs that's going to be automated first. And if that is truly where UHN's message of caring and compassion starts, we have to think about that. Not to say that a robotic android system couldn't do it. It could. I'm not here to argue against technology. I'm arguing to build in caring and compassion as the first consideration when we use technology. Another important thing for you to understand is to avoid the hysteria about we'll all be replaced by machines. Yes, some jobs will, but mostly they will change. And even in the banking industry, even the automated tellers did not reduce the number of employees in the banking system, but our jobs are going to change. And I think what we need to understand is the clerical nature, the data entry, the analysis, that will go away. Pattern recognition may go away too. But our professional ethos and interaction is going to become more important and stronger, and we need to focus on that. Technology itself is neutral. It's not good, it's not bad. It can be frightening. I mean, if you look at what's going on in the world and in North Korea, and recently actually I listened to a wonderful recounting of a woman who was a descendant of Oppenheimer, talking about the responsibilities we have as scientists. And I think that's important to think about. But the technologies themselves are what we create. They're neutral. So there are some transformations coming in caring and compassion. For sure, there are computer forms of empathy beginning to show up. They're pretty clunky. but I think they will get better. How many of you saw the movie Her? Yeah. I mean, it's pretty impressive, right? I know it's Scarlett Johansson, but well, it would be pretty impressive to have Scarlett Johansson asking me how I felt. But it's not that hard for a computer system to say, as she did, I noticed you canceled your dinners this week and you're not going to the gym. Is everything okay? It's not really complex empathy. So I think that we can expect growing empathy. The recognition of affect is getting better. Apparently with all the facial scanning and emotional detection. And this may be very useful. We have a project in UHN where there's an effort to have an automated system that will detect delirium, for example. Delirium is horribly dangerous. It's where a lot of the injuries come from. We miss it. We don't see it. There's not enough as a psychiatry. We don't see the rising heart rate together with the expressed emotion, with the agitation. If something could detect that was sensitive to it, it might alert us. It might say to the nursing station, no, this patient is upset or is becoming trouble. Yeah. So, but all of this also raises important questions of trust and how we feel about our relationship. I'm not sure how many of us are prepared yet to trust a non-human system. But I want to use a super simple example because sometimes all this technical stuff feels far away, it feels futuristic. I'm not a technical person. I simply want to talk about the computer because it's an old technology. If we had time, I'd tell you a funny story about the dial phone. But, you know, each technology as it comes along, we struggle with it in the same way. But here is the computer, and here is how most of us use it. And here is a tablet, which is exactly the same technology. In this instance, you turn your back to the patient or the family member and you type your notes. And you feel upset about that because somebody gave you a stupid system that doesn't allow you to keep eye contact. But this is a choice that you make, to sit beside the person, to look at the screen together, to share information and to talk with them. It's a choice about how we use that particular technology. And so as you go back today, I don't want you to think about robots and AI. I want you to think about the computer you're using and the degree to which it fosters quality communication and compassion with the people you're talking to, or the degree which you're choosing to use it in a way that interferes or hurts the extension of compassion and caring. This is UHN. You're in UHN, so I get to share this. And we've worked hard in the last couple of years to come up with something called our purpose, values, and principles, and to really try to personalize this and bring it down to a human individual level. And you'll notice, of course, Emily mentioned safety, compassion is there, teamwork, integrity, and stewardship. And the personalizing has tried to get it to a place where we could each say, I'm living this by. In compassion, there's a sentence, kindness and respect in every interaction. On one hand, I think you could probably write this off as apple pie and mother or fatherhood, but I think in the condition of the world today, we actually need to pay a bit of attention to this one. I'm actually not sure when I go out into the world that I see kindness and respect in very many interactions. And actually, when you see in public discourse that leaders actually do quite the opposite of this, you see that it's becoming okay for people. And I particularly worry about people in formative stages, like teenagers and kids, observing that it's not necessary to be respectful, let alone kind. So we have to redouble our effort to do this. And so coming back to the issue of the technologies, I think what we have to think is, are our technologies illustrating kindness and compassion in every interaction? This is Judith John. Judith has a wonderful patient advocate at UHN, and she chose this picture a couple of years ago to be on the cover of our annual report. It's her preparing for her radiation therapy. She chose this picture because she said, this is the time at which it's hardest for you to connect with me. We can't make eye contact. I can't speak. We can't touch each other. This is when I most need you to be able to relate to me, to reach in, around, and through the technology. Yes, I'll do it for you. Somebody in the distance has come off mute, and there's a little bit of feedback. So if you're out there and listening, if you could just double check your mutes, that would be great, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. So weird to ask a question about what will humans be needed for in terms of caring and compassion. I know that's probably a jarring question. Isn't it true that all caring and compassion comes from humans? I'm not sure. So for sure, with individual humans, yes. As Judith said, please look in my eyes. Please be present for me. Human presence absolutely is important, and we can all redouble our commitment to that, for sure. And I think if we wanted to teach anything in our schools and colleges to the next generation of health professionals, it's an awareness that you need to demonstrate human presence at all times. But this is the Borg from Star Trek. Some people think UHN is the Borg, right? Resistance is futile and we're hoovering up all the crumbs little by little. But I put this up, I know, well, you might as well say it, right? I put this up to remind us that technologies are also institutions. We're in a technology. You're sitting in a technology. All of this, the lighting, the seating, this is a technology. So it's not just the computer or the Fitbit or the gadget or your cell phone. The building is a technology. So when you expand my question to, is the technology caring and compassionate, I think you'd have to say if you're building the Borg, maybe not. So we need to ask if the places we provide care is also sustaining compassion by their very design. We have other challenges we have to meet. The drive to efficiency, that's a value. That's something important in quality care. Drive to efficiency, though, can sometimes be in competition with compassionate caring. Unfortunately, I think sometimes we confuse valet parking with compassion. I love the idea that someone will take my keys and park my car, but we should never confuse that with holding my hand or looking in my eyes and telling me that my biopsy is positive for malignant cells, or that my child is not doing well, or that my mother has just passed away. That's not valet parking. So if we create institutions that are too sterile, it has a cost, and not only on patients and families, but on us. There's a rising discussion about burnout in the system. It's impossible for me to imagine providing quality care if I'm burnt out. But at the Mayo Clinic, nobody would worry about the Mayo Clinic's funding or their reputation or anything else, but Dr. Derby, who's a colleague, has found that half of the medical students in the Mayo Clinic have signs of burnout. They're not even in practice yet. It's higher in other places. I think nursing has the unfortunate distinction of leading this with the highest amount of burnout, up to 70% in nursing. 70%. So as they do when you fly on an airplane and tell you, please put on your oxygen mask before trying to help another person, I think we have to ask the degree to which the organization takes care of our employees, our students, our colleagues, each other first. And that's not selfish. That's not a narcissistic thing. That's about being well enough to provide care. Quality care rests on the well-being of the health professionals delivering it. So to sum up, what is the future of the health professions in this area? Well, definitely digital health systems. And I think that we should be optimistic about them. Whether they're robotic or artificial intelligence or data storing systems or big data or whatever they are, they're going to advance our science, our education, and our patient care. They will. There's no question. But we have to pay now attention to us, the analog humans. We're not digital. Fundamentally, we're not. We're carbon-based, we're mostly water, we're partly electrical, but we're not digital. And so we have to think about that. I've actually reinstalled my old record player. I get out my grandmother's Peggy Lee album with the crackles and stuff, and you know, it kind of reminds me of the value of analog. I love my CD collection and I love my downloadables and stuff, but there's still something powerful about the analog, and we are all analog technologies. So Susskind and Susskind said a crucial dynamic going forward is going to be critical wise judgment, drawing on capacities that are uniquely human, like empathy, intuition, and caring. This is a really sketch. I give this a rough sketch. I give it to you humbly. I think most of the competence frameworks we use in the professions are outdated. I think they mostly belong to the 20th century. And I think we need to revisit them and maybe include things like this. Metacognition, the ability to think about thinking and adapt to complex environments. Situational awareness when we have very automated environments in which we're going to have to be vigilant. The ability to advocate for humane technologies and humane institutions, and to watch when they look like they're no longer humane, and to listen when people tell us that, or when we experience that they're not. And finally, to foreground compassion and human presence in all our interactions, including, and new for us, our interactions when we're in the human-machine interface. So my feeling to end would be that we have to be vigilant as professionals. We, of course, have to pay attention to knowledge, cognition, and technical skills. But if we ever let caring and compassion slide out of the framework, I think quality goes with it. I don't think it's possible to provide quality care that doesn't give attention to care and compassion. If we let the white coat become empty, if we take away the human, then we're in a situation that without compassion, without human compassion, I don't think there is any health care. I want to thank you very much for your attention. I'll go to Lee.
No, stay here. Thank you very, very much for that presentation. Please don't go anywhere because we're going, I am
All right.
almost certain there's going to be some
I hope
questions
so.
for you. So for those of you on the phone, if you've got a question, please just unmute your line and speak up and we'll accept your question. Or you can send it via email to us and I'll just check in with the team if any of those are coming through. Are there any questions here in the room to start things off? Darren.
Hi, I'm Darren Larson, family doc at Women's College and work in Ontario MD. I have a question about the robotics issue because, robotics with Da Vinci, lots of razzle-dazzle, lots of bright, shiny things. And then very recently a report from HQO around the benefit of, or non-benefit of robotics in prostate cancer surgery versus non. So, always interested in the technology may not always be the perfect panacea, or in many ways it's seen as panacea. In many ways it's sold to us from corporates, Canada, America, as being better, but we don't really analyze it well. We don't really think about it with the degree of scrutiny that we would analyze ourselves. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I mean, I love to go back. People will have forgotten this. The advantage of age is you see, as Cynthia White said, the carousel goes round and round. Some of you, probably very few of you, will remember in the 1970s when it was announced the Scarborough campus of University of Toronto would be the first entirely televised campus. And the idea was that the television was the new device for learning. And they spent great amount of money installing televisions all over that campus. Turns out television is actually a really terrible way to learn, but what they didn't realize was television induces alpha brainwaves and puts you to sleep. So it wasn't a great technology. However, nobody could say that television was a failure as a technology. It was a failure as a learning technology. I don't really know and wouldn't pretend to know what the future of robotics is. I suspect robotics will have a huge impact on the future. The port of Rotterdam has replaced all thousands of people with 6 now, and they have 0 incidents of problems. I think robotics is probably working in Amsterdam. Is robotics going to be important in healthcare? I think so. Is it going to be marketed by every possible niche and every company that makes one? Yes. Do we need to evaluate very carefully the impact, including the caring and compassionate side? Yes, I do think so. So that I think that is wise. But I think the cautionary tale of the television, you could actually say the same about the internet, is that technologies once created don't always do what you think they're going to do. They may do some very useful different things, but we have to study them. The researcher in me thinks we need a lot more social sciences, anthropology, and other things to examine how we are using technologies and how they're changing our lives and our work. Yeah. The thoughts?
Please.
Some of our thought leaders, like Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, deeply concerned about the potential for AI to lead to the destruction of humanity, either by destruction or obsolescence. Do you think that we have an obligation, or what are your thoughts about what do we as health professionals have to say about what limitations can we or should we be putting on AI?
It's a great question. Yeah, I'll repeat the question, So Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk and other people worry about something called the singularity in particular, which is AI becomes so powerful that it's dangerous to us. Yeah. Well, this is a great week to talk about atomic energy and discoveries, I think, isn't it? I mean, first of all, let me be really modest, because I'm not a philosopher. I'm a psychiatrist, so I know something about human relations, and I've got a degree in education, so I know about learning. I like to be interested and think about philosophy and these bigger questions, but I don't want anyone to think I'm the person with the answer to that. However, asking the question is a really important thing for us to do. So there's different ways to answer it. Scientifically, there's the whole discussion about when you invent something, are you responsible for what you've invented and what happens with it? So as a participant in the inventions of artificial intelligence systems at UHN and University of Toronto and the Vector Institute, do we need to think about that? Absolutely, we need to think about that. Can we control it? Well, did we control the atomic discovery? I'm not sure. This week would have some lessons for us from that. They may be right. Can we control it? I don't know. But what I do know is that if you look at atomic energy in healthcare, we have used it to do nuclear medicine. We have used it to do treatments, to do investigations. We have used the technology for a particular thing. I don't think that in healthcare we're going to be able to police the use of that technology for the whole universe. But we are going to be able to have very strong feelings and controls around what we use it for in our own world. The etiquette issue around communication really speaks to me. I think we might want to be proactive, because I know how easily, let's be frank, we fall into poor communication patterns in healthcare. We don't even talk to each other in a civilized way half the time. I think maybe we should start now preparing for ways that we can respectfully interact with these systems. But Jordan, I think you could answer the question as well as I can, and I'm glad you're asking it, and perhaps that's a future discussion topic. Maybe Stephen Hawking would come. Elon Musk went to Queen's University, so maybe he would come. Yeah.
One more question here.
Thanks, Brian. I think it was a very interesting sort of your reflection on burnout and caring for yourself before caring for others, and just wondering your thoughts with sort of the cyclical nature of burnout and medical errors, and sort of the second victim phenomenon, and how we can better support our healthcare professionals.
Boy, are we early in this, and this is where I do feel comfortable as a psychiatrist talking about people, trauma, we really need to think about this. So Janet Lovegrove is a nurse in McMaster, and she was an AMS fellow, and she talks very movingly about, her talk is called I Was a Burnt Out Nurse, and she talks about the day she came to work and more or less threw an elderly woman in a wheelchair, and with her, didn't even put the rests for her feet, and they were banging on the floor, and she said, I was completely impaired. Several observations. Nobody said anything to her. How did she get to that stage without anyone saying anything? Secondly, she did detect this in herself, but the secondary issues for her and soul searching and what kind of person am I, and it's dehumanizing, all that is huge. And then, as people have spoken about, Peter Pisters has talked about his own in a video it made at UHN about leaving a sponge in a patient, or Charlie Chan, about the chief of the medical staff, about giving the wrong chemotherapy, or Joy Richards, the chief nursing executive, talking about giving 10 times the opioid dose to a patient. Those are senior people. None of those are wilting lilies. I mean, they're not people who are reticent to speak up. And yet here they are. Only at this point in their career can they actually talk about that. So I think we've created an environment that is extremely difficult to do that. It's the kind of thing that reminds me of a patient that holds a secret and confesses it to me after 5 years of getting to know me in psychotherapy. So, I think it's a question of how do we allow that to come forward and normalize it.
That's great. I think that, unfortunately, I think we're going to need to draw the session to a close.
Okay.
But I just want to say thank you. I think this was just an incredible talk and an incredible reminder that we need to be thinking about compassion as we're thinking about the delivery of quality care and the experience for our patients, and particularly mindful as we increasingly rely on technology as part of as a delivery partner. I love this, the notion of a relationship with the robots that we're working with. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you, and I'm sure everybody else will share in that. Yeah, we'll keep going.
Yes.
And so just as we're wrapping up here, there's sort of two things that I wanted to mention, and then we'll come back to the evaluation. The first is that, Dr. Hodges has already posted on Quorum a question to all of you, which is, do you think new technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, enhance or diminish compassion? And so please feel free to go in and comment and share some of your thoughts and ideas following this session today. The other thing I just wanted to mention, our next interaction with this community is likely to be on November the 17th, which is a big day where we'll be celebrating Change Day. And this is an initiative that we're actually undertaking with our partners at AMS Healthcare and many other partners across the health system. And the idea is that we may all be looking to make pledges about how we may embark on changes that as individuals in the way that we're contributing to quality health care. Again, I feel like we've had some great thoughts today on what we should be mindful as we do that. So just wanted to share this, and again, hope to reconnect with all of you as well through some sort of a celebration on November the 17th. And then finally, I also just want to come back and please request that you take just a couple of minutes to give us your feedback on these sessions. We do try to take all that feedback to heart and also are always open to topics or suggestions that you may have. So with that, I want to say a huge thank you to the team here at UHN, particularly those in the room here that have helped ensure that the technology has worked well for us today. It's probably been our best set so far in terms of it going smoothly. And just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for coming out today and for your ongoing commitment to quality. We'll see you soon. Thanks.